Welcome back, pod people. Today, my guest is Peter Cannon, the writer-director of Exposure, a currently unreleased thriller that is the second part of our sort of double feature that we're doing this month, with the other one being By Deception, which is a similar thriller in that they both very much remind me of a certain classic film, or a pair of classic films, really, from 1940 and 1944, which, if you've listened to the By Deception episode, you already know what I'm talking about. And I'll go ahead and remind everyone listening that this is a full spoilers podcast, and so we will be talking about the ending of the movie, and indeed, when I tell you what classic films this reminds me of, that will be a spoiler. So if you don't want that, stop listening now. Now that you're still listening, those classic films are Gaslight, because this movie, like By Deception, is about someone who is having their perception of the world deliberately altered by the people around them, and by being made to question their ability to accurately perceive reality. And this is a really interesting one, because it is both this really, fascinating character-driven thriller, and it also, the antagonist has a very different motive than I'm used to in this sort of thing. Normally, either like in the original two Gaslight films, the antagonist is trying to trick the protagonist in order to acquire something of value, or like in By Deception, to sort of use them to their own end. And in Exposure, at least as it's presented by the antagonist, although if that's meant to be unreliable, again, I would love to hear that, it's being done to try to help the protagonist in this really twisted way, to help the main character, who suffers from obsessive compulsive disorder and is experiencing really traumatic and debilitating flashbacks to a horrible experience that they had before the events of the film begin. The antagonist is really trying to get the protagonist to get over this, and it doesn't really work, at least not in the way that they intended. So could you talk a bit about the antagonist's motives, how you came up with that, and how you decided on that sort of structure for this film?
Well, this is first off, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's fascinating to hear you talk about. We're past the spoiler threshold. It's fascinating to hear you talk about Nicole, Tanner's wife, as a straight antagonist. And as more people watch this film, some exit the film looking at Nicole as a straight antagonist, and then others exit the film thinking that, oh, the only real antagonist here is Tanner's destructive thought pattern. And Nicole's just, in her own way, trying her best. Now, the structure went through quite a few redrafts as we went on. I think I'm a very thesis-oriented writer. I like starting with, okay, what do I want to say about this topic? What do I want to say about, like, the human experience, the human condition, whatever? And then create characters that kind of just show that. And so with Exposure, which deals with obsessive compulsive disorder, which is something I hadn't really seen in movies portrayed in the way that at least folks like me experience it, which is more in a bit of a scarier context than maybe Jack Nicholson shows it in As Good as It Gets. He throws a dog down a garbage chute in that movie. I think
I haven't seen that movie, and so when you said Jack Nicholson, the first two films that popped into my head were One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and The Shining. I was like, oh, yeah. I guess typing the same sentence over and over as a compulsion, I could see that. But
no, this is in the rom-com As Good as It Gets. There's other movies that touch upon OCD, and there's TV shows too. And it's not to say that those iterations are wrong. It's just the way that a lot of folks experience it, and the way that a lot of folks kind of deal with it, are in a way that is incredibly unnerving, relentless, and unpleasant, and terrifying, and scary, and corrosive. And it's that's just something I hadn't really seen in film, or if it is in film, then I haven't seen it. And so I wanted to sort of take a crack at it because I feel like after existing with it for as long as I have, I maybe know a thing or two about it. I will say that as far as the structure goes, the thesis I kind of wanted to start with is something that folks with OCD kind of needs to learn. That wasn't grammatically correct, but you get the idea. Folks with OCD, they have a really hard time accepting uncertainty. And part of this anxiety disorder is just the constant alarm bells around the fact that your worst fear, or whatever worst fear that someone with an obtrusive obsession might have, could on paper happen. And they say this pretty pretty plainly in the movie, like to be alive is to accept that your worst fear could happen. Now so I like, okay, so let's have a protagonist like be like, oh my god, this thing's gonna happen to me, this guy's coming back to get me. Eventually he learns, oh, I have so much more control over my life if I practice this thing called exposure response prevention therapy. I have so much more control over my life than I thought I did. But then he kind of, the two-side coin of that is that, like, okay, yeah, but we still live in a world of reality where this thing could happen. Just because you're putting yourself through these drastic amounts of exposure therapies doesn't mean that, like, we don't live in a world where, like, you could get hit by a car if you're not looking while walking down the street, There is a balance of reality there. And in the end, it's a movie about tolerating uncertainty.
Yeah. So to address my calling her the antagonist, I didn't mean that in the sense that like she's a villain. I meant that in the sense that she is the secondary character whose actions drive the plot. That it's really, the plot is driven by the main character, by the protagonist and the antagonist and their actions and interactions. And you could still have a movie without her in it, but it would be a different movie. And I think you could get rid of almost any other character in the film without drastically affecting it. Everyone else is tertiary to those two. That's what I meant by it.
Oh, I see what you're saying, because Nicole's presence is the stakes of the film, at least in my eyes. The idea that, like, Tanner's forced to go into this to take this seriously because he's on the verge of losing Nicole, and he's forced to sort of do this little dance of going to this exposure group that doesn't initially believe in, and then he rediscovers, like that he can be a full person again, because OCD can really eclipse your personality, and there's so much more to a person than their mental disorder. And about halfway through the movie, he kind of rediscovers that, and he can be the husband he wants to be to Nicole again. It's, yeah, like I do like the little glimmers of hope in this movie. But yeah, I do agree with you that Nicole plays kind of opposite to Tanner. Maybe that's a good way of saying it too.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, that's the etymology of the word antagonist.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah. So talking a bit about obsessive compulsive disorder and its depiction in fiction, I agree that it's rare to see it presented, and it's even more rare to see it presented in this serious, debilitating way, where most of the time when you see OCD in fiction, or like you see a character who supposedly has obsessive compulsive disorder, it's a character like Monk in the TV show Monk, where it's quirky and wacky and isn't a serious problem that they have to deal with. And moreover, it's almost always depicted as being really focused on the compulsion part of it. Things like, oh, I have to wash my hands 37 times or something like that. And the obsession part is largely ignored. And it really seemed almost reversed in this, that the obsession part is far and away the most significant and affecting part. And the compulsion, I can't actually remember if I see him doing anything that looked like a compulsive ritual. What was there a moment of that?
I love that you're bringing all this up, because there's like 3 or 4 things I want to address here. So I love that you've made that note that, yeah, we've seen a lot of compulsions in previous iterations. We've seen a lot of rituals. So in OCD, and I'm gonna, before I dive into this deep hole, I'm not a therapist. I'm a filmmaker who made a movie about OCD because I have OCD. There's probably, if you're looking for something real, medically real, you don't listen to a horror podcast. Don't, you know, this is me, a guy who made a movie, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but
so
it's a movie about a thing that you experience. You're not just like a guy who was like, hey, you know what would be a fun subject to make a movie about? This random mental illness.
Exactly. No, this random mental illness is something I've had a fun old time with for 12 years. And no. I will say, okay, so back to obsessions. There is a whole subset of OCD that actually doesn't have visual, physical, concrete compulsions, and the compulsions are mental. It's called pure O. If you look up pure O on the internet, you'll see a bunch of different kinds of like subsets of OCD whose compulsions, those little rituals that make you feel better, make you feel safe, those things are not actually something you can physically see. They're mental rituals. Now, to your question on if there are rituals in the film, they're a little sneakier because compulsions can come in the form of reassurances or avoidances, things that you kind of use in sort of a self-preservation way. And this is unfortunately in long-term relationships. You can use your significant other as a prop to provide yourself with constant reassurance. Nicole keeping in bed saying, hey, I'm going to keep you safe. There's just, I'm going to keep you safe forever. Just the word safe over and over and over again. Nicole being like, look, I won't make you anything that isn't from like a sealed can, you know, avoiding cooking with food that has been exposed to literally anything else. You know, like those avoidances and those reassurances are actually compulsions. Those are those little things that make you feel a little bit safer, which then ultimately feed into the making the obsession scarier and continuing that sort of cycle. Right. So the movie is riddled with compulsions. And now that we're spoiling the whole thing, I'd kind of like to say that Nicole was the ultimate compulsion for Tanner, and abandoning that at the end, sort of kind of releasing her and being able to live without her because the discomfort's the point, is kind of like the OCD high score, you know?
Yeah. So speaking about the food issue where he's concerned that somebody's going to try to poison him, there was one line in the movie that really surprised me, and I want to check in if I'm interpreting it correctly, where he's kidnapped the guy who kidnapped him earlier, which was the source of all of his trauma initially, and the guy like said something about putting rat poison in his food. Did that happen? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah. So
was the guy actually putting rat poison in his food?
During that kidnapping experience, what happened was this man, tweaked out of his mind, was suffering his own delusions that somebody was following him, sees Tanner on the street, picks him up off the street, kidnaps him, demands, tortures him, going like, why are you following me? All that. And then comes down, realizes I can't let this guy go, but I don't have the balls to kill him in the room. So I guess I'll just kind of try and kill him out of the room, sneak rat poison into his food. From Tanner's perspective, he's being faceless serial.
Okay. The rat poison was something that happened during the initial kidnapping. I thought that he was admitting to have like when Tanner finds that like powder in his water bottle, I thought the guy was admitting that he had been sneaking into the house and trying to poison Tanner, and that made me be like, "What? I thought that was all a delusion."
That would have been a big bomb.
That was the. I was also interpreting that later as like that was the powder was the crushed up Xanax.
Exactly.
Okay. Glad to have that resolved.
Of course, yeah. No, it's, but when you see Tanner's obsession with someone coming to poison all the food he's eating, right. It did come from that one time where someone was poisoning him, just not with the sinister. Well, yes, with the sinister intentions, but he lacked a lot of the context, so he made up his own context with what people that go through these kinds of traumas can often do, especially with the years that followed, the sort of the obsessive buildup. It really kind of he turned this character into so much more in his head than it actually like for the audience. When we find him, he's just some guy, he's not some all-knowing, omniscient, terrorizer, badass guy. He's
just true, but everyone is just some guy. Like,
very true.
I mean, we're not. I would have been extremely surprised if it had turned out that there was some sort of vast conspiracy or supernatural element or anything like that. So I had been assuming the entire time that this was taking place in a naturalistic world, and like serial killers and kidnappers and stuff in the real world are just some guy. And so
true.
I guess to me, when we encountered the guy, I did not feel as though my expectations were being upended. I was like, we're encountering this guy, and as expected, he's some guy who's off his rocker in some regard. And then it turns out that the regard is like meth binges. And excuse me if off his rocker is not a great.
Fine. People told me not to, like, you shouldn't say crazy. I go, that's crazy. Like I one thing I will say is it's we do exist in a naturalistic world, and I did spend the entirety of the movie showing that Tanner is an extremely unreliable narrator, or at least an unreliable person to follow. So you are right that you wouldn't be wrong to expect that what he experienced was not as grandiose as he remembered it to be, or that the inclinations plague him as. Yeah.
Which, again, I think that's true of pretty much everyone. Nobody remembers things with like perfect fidelity. There is always a degree of exaggeration or downplaying different elements of memories. So speaking of the setting, the world that this takes place in, I thought you did a really good job with doing world building by revealing small glimpses of things. Like there's the character in the support group who it is never explicitly stated, but I am very confident was like a young gay man brought up in a hyper-religious environment, which caused him a lot of trauma because of the confluence of those two things. And like you're nodding along, indicating that I got that right. And
what I love about that is that in audiences at this point are incredibly like, we've been given a media diet of so many tropes over the years that we can fill in blanks so quickly without saying a damn thing, which I love at this point in film history. Like, yes, film's incredibly saturated at this point. There's maybe too many of them, but the upside of that is that because there are so many landmark tropes, characters, pieces of drama, we can actually leave some of this information out and have the audiences kind of click that together in their heads. And we've already established in that movie that OCD can come from trauma. And then we have this young man, and from what we know about strict religious organizations and sexual orientation, like there are certain tropes and interactions there that that we have preconceived notions about that, right. that you can kind of, we suddenly know a lot about Ezekiel, or we feel like we know Ezekiel without really saying a whole lot about it.
Yeah. One part I do kind of want to push back on in that, which is really, I think, just a matter of vocabulary, is calling these things tropes. Because I've found that, especially among horror fans, the more people focus on the concept of tropes, the more they sort of handicap themselves as storytellers. I find that when people, I mean, this isn't universally true, but in general, when people really think about films in terms of tropes, and especially if they then go on to make films of their own, they end up with cliches. Uh, and I don't think that's what's going on here. I think that film is at this point a mature art form, and we as audience members are familiar with how film works. We're not going to be scared of the train approaching the camera the way that audiences were back in the day.
But the movies you could make if they still were. The things we could do.
Yeah, hey, just make do a bad job making a 3D movie and you can still make people throw up.
Yeah, right.
And so I think that it's less about established tropes within the specific medium of film and more about audiences being used to things like alluding to broader cultural mores and existing organizations and concepts, which you could call tropes, but I find that when you use the word trope specifically, especially within the context of horror films, people think of things of like, yes, it's a cabin in the woods and there's a stoner and a virgin. And
so a trope, I don't mean trope in a condescending way. I meant more like a cultural convention.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I think maybe when I say trope, it sort of comes off to some folks as like because you use the word cliche, and I think a trope is not a cliche at all. But I think I hear where you're coming from, that that there can be some connotations to trope that are either condescending or belittling, and that wasn't what I kind of meant by that. I meant kind of things that audiences are sort of familiar enough with that the story can sort of take advantage of it in a more unique, more recent way.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I really only was pushing back against that because of a conversation that I had not on this podcast with somebody recently, where we ended up sort of like talking past each other by using the word differently, and especially by being like talking about like, oh, this film is inspired by, tropes of 80s horror films, and they're like, oh, okay, that means it's a slasher in the woods with a virgin. And I'm like, well, actually, right. I was referring to the low budget atmosphere, the use of practical effects and things like that, but etc. Anyways, we're getting too far afield.
Yeah, no worries. But I think we're on the same page. Just the idea was the audience is pretty set up to understand Ezekiel without a lot of explanation.
Yeah, they're coming at the film with a lot of background knowledge. I really enjoyed the interaction between Ezekiel and I can't remember the character's name, but the older fellow who was like afraid that he might be gay.
Charlie.
Yeah,
sexual obsession disorder. Oh, man.
Say that again. Sexual.
Called SOOCD, sexual orientation OCD. It used to be called HOCD, where it was homosexuality OCD. But there have been plenty of people that are actually LGBT that are afraid that they're in fact straight and therefore they do not love their partners anymore. Or there is a long rabbit hole you can fall down. There is debates on is SOOCD even real on YouTube? You could go far down that rabbit hole. And it was really funny. So Alex Feldman, the actor that we used for Charlie, I would walk into fire for that guy. That guy was an incredible actor. Hilarious human being too. But he discovered one of these rabbit holes and he was like, oh, wow. Oh no. So this is very real. This is, okay, yeah. And it's so the purpose of introducing the sexual orientation one, was number one to show that like a lot of con versions of OCD are versions of OCD that you might not be aware of. But number two, at this point in the story, Tanner has been told that 100% sure that no, this isn't real. You have OCD. This like this guy's not out to get you. You're mentally ill. And then he's confronted with this guy where it just like at the moment, at the time in his brain, seems an awful lot like he's trying to just talk himself out of a reality, you know? And so that sets off a whole new string of questions in Tanner's head, because right after that scene where he learns that about that person and he says, but he wouldn't go so far out of his way to lie to himself. You know, he joined the group, right? And then Ezekiel says being paranoid about something doesn't stop it from happening. So that
was interesting, and that was one of the parts that really made me go, oh yeah, the people making this movie really know what they're talking about with OCD, because I was already aware that was a specific type, a specific fear that people have, and I've observed very similar, like I don't have any of these issues myself, but I've known people who do, and I've observed extremely similar interactions to that one between Charlie and Ezekiel, and I was just going, wow, this really rings true to life.
It's it's tough because some of these are like, they sound aggressive, or they sound like they're ignorant or bigoted, you know, when like, and there is a cultural autopsy to be had where it's like, you know, that this could come from some element of homophobia. At the same time, this pattern is happening to a lot of people that it is also in fact real, and it does match all of the patterns of obsessive compulsive disorder. It has the obsessions, the what if questions, and then the little things that you do to make yourself feel better. Like, I know a place. Let's go to the most masculine fucking bar in that I can possibly think of, so I can feel better about my heterosexuality.
Oh, yeah. If there's one thing that gay men hate, it's masculine bars.
Yeah, right. It was really funny. Like it's. I think my AD may have pointed out that irony when we were shooting that scene. Like, we just filled that bar up with like just big dudes, you know.
Yeah. It looks like a bear bar.
Yeah, I love that. That's so funny.
Quick meta question. It is now raining pretty strongly where I am. Can you hear that?
No.
Oh, wow. Awesome. And I don't need
Good
to do
job.
anything about it.
Yeah.
I've got my window open because in addition to raining, it's like 102 degrees here. So
That's everywhere. Yeah, I am sorry about that.
So I gotta say, I did not expect the ending with where the guy's wife is like deliberately trying to trick him, and moreover doing it out of this sort of good place in her heart, both trying to help him but also coming at it from like sort of a selfish perspective of she is tired of dealing with his shit. So is that a realistic thing? Is that a thing that happens?
I think desperation is incredibly realistic. I think.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
I think people that are in a situation that they cannot escape, that they have tried every other avenue, they have tried reason, and you know, like she doesn't really have a lot of friends to bring her back to reality. She hangs out with her coworkers once, and like you can see in the movie that she just opens up to them, you know? So like her day-to-day is kind of conquered by this guy and his mental disorder, you know? That happens a lot in relationships where one person, and this isn't even just about OCD, this is about any kind of ongoing problem that like this could be any mental disorder, it could be a disability, it could be some kind of chronic illness, where it's nobody's fault, but it kind of
doesn't make it easy.
that doesn't make it easy. And oftentimes the dynamic of the relationship can kind of turn into this caretaker, caretakee kind of dynamic, which is really corrosive to the way, like, the corrosive to the caretakers, well, also the caretakee, but like it's corrosive to livelihoods, it's corrosive to passions, to dreams, to what you thought the dynamic was in the first place.
Yeah.
And I don't want to like throw the term psychologically abusive around, but it's the idea. It wasn't a healthy union.
It can contain many of the same psychologically damaging things that psychological abuse can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was a difficult part to watch. Not just one part, several parts of seeing how this was affecting her as the caretaker, like you said, and seeing those like little moments, like the part where he makes both of them eggs, and like he pretends that he already ate his, but actually he just put it in the trash. And like watching her get her hopes up when she thinks that he's eaten normal food and then realize that he didn't. That was affecting. So
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, and I it's funny because like there in that house, and this is like more of like a filmmaking story kind of thing, but like this is an indie movie. We're always flying by the seat of our pants here, and like we have 3 shots for that whole scene. There's so many like little scenes like in the morning or whatnot. Like you have time for like coverage on him, coverage on her, and then we got to move on. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. Okay, fine. Let's get rid of this shot. Let's have the camera fly all the way over here so that, and then tilt down so we can see the trash can. We don't have time for an insert where we see directly into the trash can. So now we're just going to tilt down, have it in the same shot, and like, I'm glad these moments still come across, because it's feel like you're whittling it down to barely coherent scenes just because of the constraints of being a low budget indie film. But certain things had to be saved in editing. I had an amazing editor, just because of the lack of time that we had. Oh my goodness. But I'm glad you liked that scene. I liked the scene quite a bit. Another scene that I had to drastically change. Thankfully before the shooting started, but when he picks up a gun, originally that scene was supposed to take place in a gun store. And there's this I don't know if you ever, and this is kind of a silly reference, but I don't know if you ever saw the first X-Men reboot, X-Men First Class. You ever watch that?
I have, yes.
So in the very first scene, we were back with like little Magneto, Eric, and he meets like the concentration camp.
In the concentration camp, yeah.
Yeah. And he's having this conversation, right? And then it breaks the 180 line. The camera goes to the other side of them, and we see a wall full of torture devices, right? Just a simple cut. And then, so what I wanted to do was have one camera looking outside the door, have him come in and be like, hey, yeah, like at this point we still think he's going to go like apply for a job or something. He's all, and so some vague conversation. Oh yeah, no, like, and he goes like, are you ready? Like, yeah, I'm ready to sleep at night. We go, what? Then we cut and we see a bunch of guns on the wall. Like I kind of want that moment a little bit. But unfortunately, shooting in a gun store is a legal or a liability nightmare.
Really?
No, just there was, from a producing standpoint, it's like it introduces a lot of extra considerations that need to be taken in order for crew and cast to safely shoot there. So what we ended up doing was we had it in a parking lot where he got a gun off some sketchy dude in on Craigslist, which the added bonus of we could set it up a little bit more, like have vague dialogue about him coming into an office and then have like a guy kind of dressed up like an office worker. Nope, he's buying a gun.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm a little surprised that there's two aspects of what you just said. One, that shooting in a gun store would introduce additional liability, because I would imagine that like it's a store. If there's any kind of store that I would expect to have a small chance of like being robbed or whatever, it would be a gun store. And if there's anyone that I would expect to be really good at firearm safety, it's somebody who owns a gun store. But I
I
don't own a
am
gun store, so I don't know.
the writer, I am the director, but I was not the producer. And the producers
Ah,
say, "Hey, find a different way," and I go, "I believe you because I am not
okay,
as intelligent as you are."
okay. The other thing that I found surprising about what you said was that you said you shot coverage, um, which my understanding of that is that you have like one or several cameras shooting a scene uh, with less of a focus on getting specific shots and more of a focus on getting everything recorded so that in editing you can take all the little bits that you want from all the different shots that you took and assemble them into the montage of what you actually want to be conveyed in the scene. Uh, is that
So
what you meant by
we
that, or
we did not have a second camera. Everything shot with one camera, and we
okay?
would do multiple takes and move the camera around as most single cam shoots go.
Right.
And then when I say coverage, I mean colloquially what's not the wide shot and what is the singles on either character.
Hmm.
And then yeah, like close-ups and whatnot fall under the umbrella term of coverage. But from an indie film standpoint, when we're like, we need to get this coverage and get out of there, it's it's pretty bare bones. I'd love to be able to have every conceivable puzzle piece that I can put together and post. Honestly, the only time I felt like I had any of that was that bar scene because we that one scene was the only thing we shot that day. And like that was a rarity. We were usually doing company moves all over the place, you know, like fitting multiple things into multiple days or multiple things into one day. And yeah, and incidentally, that's the scene that my editor had the best time with because he didn't have to save it, you know?
Okay, so could you go into a little more detail about what you consider like the difference between shooting with coverage versus the alternative?
Well, I mean, and maybe I'm using a little too loosely, but there's like the really traditional idea of coverage is like if you have a scene of two people talking, you would have a wide of wherever they are. So one wide with, you know, like the setting, it sets the scene, it sets where they are geographically in relation to the area, in relation to each other. And then you would be able, like after you go through the entire scene with that wide, then you would pick a direction because from a standpoint of scheduling, it's an unless for, you know, like every situation's different, but oftentimes it's easier to just move the camera inwards after recording the first after shooting the single of the person A looking at person B. It's easier to just move the camera and get a close up of that exact same things. You don't have to mess with any of the lights. You don't have to mess with any of the production design. You don't have to do anything else.
Right.
And then you can get any kind of little insert of like their fingers on the table or like their some important prop or whatever. And then you flip the camera all the way around, move those lights out of the way, and then you do the exact same thing. You move in. Now that's essentially the most traditional definition of coverage. When I say this movie was stretched so thin that when I guess we used coverage for the word coverage for like we need to see Tanner's face in this scene, you know. We need to
Okay.
get his coverage before we go, you know.
Okay.
Like in a more traditional and comfortable environment, we would coverage involves, to my knowledge, and obviously people use these terms very differently, like the medium, the close-up,
Right.
a one variation on said close-up or medium, and then maybe there's a second wide, like an alternate wide if the scene's a bit more complicated, because an alternate wide can we got an alternate wide in the flash forward scene when we skip a few months and they're all sitting at the table, right, and Tanner's seemingly
Mhm.
fine and they see the van. We got an alternate wide there when it reestablishes the geography a little bit for an especially long scene. If you feel like oh, I feel a little uncomfortable that I've seen this wide and these like 3-4 characters from the same perspective so long, I'm starting to lose where I need a refresher of some kind. I need like a breath of fresh air. So you know
Right.
like changing up the wide really achieves that in a nice way. That being said, these are conventions. They are not hard and fast rules. A lot of the quote unquote coverage, or in just reality, the choice of shots that I made were often involved like a floating camera, you know, like walking handheld with the actor from one room to the other, and then like doing a pan from their face to what they're looking at, or maybe a rack focus from behind someone to that thing that is behind someone. You know, those choices are more 2010s indie film conventions, you know. One, if you ever go back and you watch, recently I did another podcast where we picked apart that movie Black Swan. So 2010, 2011. And I took a lot of the inspiration for how I wanted to cover it from that movie. So if you ever watch that movie again, and you'll see like the camera following Natalie Portman around, or that like you'll see Natalie Portman walk into a room and then the camera swings around to see what she's looking at. Like you go, oh, I see where Peter got this.
Okay. Yeah, I do like that kind of shot. It makes it feel like we're really seeing things from the point of view of the character. And especially like the kind of shot where they're walking and the camera's looking at their face, really makes it feel like not only are we sort of seeing things from their point of view, but metaphorically they're being very sort of caught up in their own head at the moment.
It's a subjective movie with a subjective story. And so we do want to remain as much as we can from the perspective of this guy, and his perspective gets worked. One thing that I tried to do, and I would say you can see it. I don't think I was able to get it as much as I'd like it to, but I wanted to kind of keep the camera floating whenever there are these kinds of like intimate drama character moments and character scenes. But when we started devolving into like a nightmare or an obsession or a memory or something along those lines, that's when I'd want to start putting the camera on like sticks, like on the tripod, like or on the dolly, and have those really rigid movements, almost like people were kind of holding their breath. And then when we're back into those drama scenes, we can like breathe again and the camera's breathing, you know. That was kind of something I wanted to explore with my DP. And there were some really interesting ways that we achieved that, I'd say. If you go back and you watch that scene where we remember how he's kidnapped, or like that he finds himself outside the donut shop, and then we flash. That's all on a tripod or on sticks or on I still we're all proud of that shot where like we put the dolly in the van and then we pull the camera back and then he's coming through the van. We all like that shot. Yeah, no, like we wanted to have the scarier scenes be rigid, feel rigid, you know. And that's something that I don't think is particularly unusual, but it was something that was important for this movie, in my opinion.
I was going to say it seems almost the opposite of how I normally see it done. I normally see when a filmmaker opposes the handheld versus I'm not familiar with the phrase on sticks, but I can guess what it means, like on a tripod or a dolly or something.
I thought it's just the way they say it on set. I don't know why, they just do.
All right. Yeah. So normally when I see a filmmaker juxtapose shooting on sticks versus shooting handheld in order to convey a sense of unreality, usually it's the handheld one that's unreal, because it's less controlled, less composed, more at the mercy of the situation and the elements around you, and less objective and less. You can't, like with a shot that's on a tripod, especially a long shot like there were in the kidnapping scene. You can look all around the screen. You can take in all the little details, which are the kind of things that often, when you're in some sort of either like high adrenaline state or like a delusional state, you can't do that sort of thing. And in contrast, when you're calm and sane, you can look around and observe all of the details, like that grounding technique that they mentioned, And so I found that to be like a really interesting sort of contrast thing. Kind of made me wonder if like would that grounding technique be effective for him, given that the focus of it, the grounding technique, which is a real thing that people actually do, is when you're having a panic attack or something similar, in order to get yourself out of the mental loop that you're in, you focus on the physical sensations that you're experiencing. So like, what can I hear? What can I smell? Feel like right now I can feel the texture of the blanket that I'm sitting on top of, that kind of thing. And in the flashbacks, like the donut shop one where he gets kidnapped, there's a lot of vivid detail. And so if someone was experiencing that as like a vivid flashback like that, I wonder, would that technique help? Because I mean, you could hear like the crunch of his boot on the asphalt. You can see all of the little details of the van. And so, yeah, I'm curious, was that something you had in mind when picking that method of shooting?
I wouldn't say that I picked the method of shooting so that people were able to take in more detail. I would be able to kind of. You brought up a lot of really cool things. I'm just trying to figure out how I want to. The first thing is, when it comes to the handheld bit, I do agree that it's a very subjective way of shooting, and it's moving around. Oftentimes you don't get a lot of detail. I feel like in the 2010s onward, there's a big movement in indie films to kind of have that kind of handheld feel, be more like the thing that shows kind of intimacy between two people.
Okay.
Her by Spike Jones comes to mind.
That's the one about the like artificial intelligence
AI that's in his ear that they fall in love. Yeah. I feel like there was a big movement in films that to kind of have those really intimate moments be on handheld, and that is a convention, maybe not a trope, but a convention that I feel like we're all kind of used to. And then having things on sticks, number one, is an opposite, and number two, whenever we're waiting for either a scare or for something to happen, or for it's I feel like less movement is better in terms of waiting, in terms of drawing it out, which I think having the camera on sticks helps out a lot with. I think it really helps out a lot with suspense. But so yeah, now to your point about does it introduce too much detail? I don't know. I think when it comes to like how much someone uses CBT, like those grounding techniques, and how much people use ERP, the exposures, it depends on the person what's more effective, and every person's different in what they use. And it's not going to be a one size fits all kind of thing, which is kind of what Tanner learned on the way through,
Right. Yeah. And to clarify, I wasn't saying that as a filmmaking choice it was too much detail. I was saying that as a filmmaking choice, it makes me wonder whether the character is in a position such that technique that helps the other characters might not help him.
It's possible. He doesn't, but the only thing that would give the answer was if he tried it. He doesn't. But
right.
It would have been interesting if he tried it at that juncture in the story.
Yeah, that was really interesting. The fact that technique is brought up, but then not used. Like, what was why did you choose to do that instead of just not having anyone ever mention it?
It's brought up a few times, and it's brought up a few times, and Tanner. First off, Tanner's kind of a cocky character. He thinks he's above this group that his wife dragged him to. Like, okay, well, I'll sit through, just make her happy. Okay, it seems like there's something to it. Okay, this, okay, that. He doesn't really. It takes him a while to fully submit himself to all this. And then he always kind of he has a hard time listening, which is a lot of folks with OCD have a hard time listening because they're spending so much time thinking about themselves. Secondly,
that's an interesting way to phrase it. Thinking about themselves. as opposed to
Yeah.
thinking about the object of their obsession.
Yeah, because when they think about the object of their obsession, there's usually some kind of worst case scenario attached to it. Worst case scenario attached to it affects you. You're obsessing because
Okay.
out of this
Okay.
kind of twisted, skewed sense of self-preservation, for either you or maybe someone that you care about or something that you care about. But it is a very, it's like, lots of anxiety disorders are very self-interested things.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. I see what you mean.
Yeah. Where were we? We were talking about
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I asked you what was your motivation in having the characters bring up this grounding technique, given that Tanner never uses it. Why do that instead of just not bringing it up at all?
because I think that in reality, real OCD recovery involves learning a lot more than just one type of therapy. And
Okay.
because you can't just do exposures, like that there's like like Pat says in the movie, exposure is a treatment, it's not a cure. There's this whole, as of right now, as of 2023, there isn't a cure for OCD. There's a management,
Indeed.
and sometimes you need some things. Sometimes you need medication. Sometimes you need grounding exercises. Sometimes you need exposures. Sometimes you need all of it, in various proportions. And we live in kind of this hellscape in which mental health services aren't widely available for the people that need it. And so he's going to this ragtag group of people that, much like him, can't afford anything else. And he's never sat down and said, hey, listen, you can't just do this one thing. Also, the way that you're doing it could be considered dangerous in certain, in certain ways, or in certain contexts. We need to this is what this really is. It was never sat down and really defined for him in its importance. It was just kind of brought up and he kind of batted away because he didn't feel like it was so necessary. But he did hear it enough times to, at that point, right when he was snapped out of that tunnel vision, when Mark says, the man he captures says, I was paranoid. I thought someone was out to get me. I was following me. It just kind of snaps him out of his tunnel vision enough, and then he grounds himself and he can think about the situation clearer, and he doesn't commit murder, and I'd say that's a plus.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking about the traumatic event, the kidnapping that prompted this, you earlier mentioned that OCD is something that you've been dealing with for 12 years. And this is an audio only podcast, so people cannot see you, but I am confident in asserting that you are more than 12 years old. And so I'm by no means an OCD expert. Is it a thing that is often triggered by a specific traumatic event?
It can be. Sometimes it's just puberty. Sometimes it is yeah, haha, puberty traumatic. But but sometimes there.
Sorry, I guess that wasn't very. That was a bit uncouth of me to laugh. But
yeah, but first off, puberty is hilarious. Secondly, there's the reasons for OCD sometimes can be grandiose, like a grand traumatic event of some kind. Sometimes people are predisposed to it, and they're predisposed to having these cyclical thought patterns, and then something traumatic.
I'm more familiar with.
And then something traumatic can happen, and then they can assign those cyclical patterns to that were already there, but now they have content. They have content to obsess over. It really depends from person to person. There's also, and this is why I included Izzy with like histories of drug abuse. Drug abuse or a drug addiction can be kind of be a comorbidity with OCD in a sense that people can try and medicate their obsessions as a compulsion, or on the other way around, drug addictions can cause chemical changes in the brain that cause OCD symptoms. And
Ah,
a lot of those things kind of go hand in hand. So
oh,
drug
interesting.
abuse, PTSD, puberty, it can come from a lot of different places. It's why it's such a hard thing to nail down, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me wonder if it's one of those conditions where we use one word to refer to it, but if we could actually look at the underlying reality directly, we might discover that, oh, this is actually like three different things or five different things or however many that are all that just happen to share this specific aspect, but the actual causes and the relevant treatments are distinct for them. I'm
Well,
not saying it is that way. I'm saying that it makes me wonder if it's that way.
yeah, no, I mean it's so it's interesting you bring that up because exposure response prevention therapy or exposure therapy, it can be used for both PTSD and OCD, but those are two
Yes.
different things, even though they can go hand in hand.
Right.
Um, Additionally speaking, there are things like obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which is a separate disorder from OCD. There are there like I explained, there's pure O, which is OCD without the physical compulsions. I believe there's a thing called Tourettic OCD, in which the compulsions are they are kind of the compulsions result in vocal tics. There's then you get like a bunch of folks in the psychology community. They're all kind of arguing as like okay, well, this is actually part of this category and this is not the part of that category. And it's a constantly developing understanding. And I'm going to say for the 50th time, I'm not a psychologist, but it's you are right in that what we understand to be one thing could be three things 5 years from now.
Yeah. Yeah, like I wonder, I don't actually know the history of this, but now I'm curious, was obsessive compulsive personality disorder previously considered like just a subset of OCD and now they've split it off into a separate thing? Do you happen to know that?
I know very little about OCPD.
Okay.
I just know that it's
Fair
not
enough.
OCD. Oh
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a big old world, and I just I feel like this movie takes kind of a beginning stab, being like, hey, listen, guys, OCD is kind of like this big topic, you know. So I hope that and there are some people online that have really connected with it, being like, yes, this is kind of what I was trying to show my friends and family what OCD actually is kind of like. But it's I hope I can get it out there at some point or another.
Yeah. Yeah. If we could, I would like to take a brief break and then come back and I would like to talk with you about the online and otherwise distribution of the film and independent filmmaking in general.
Love that. Yeah.
And we're back. So, you were talking about people's reaction to it online, but I watched a screener of the film and it has not been released yet to my knowledge. Has it been released?
It has not been released. It's everything's really on hold because of certain worldly events.
Yeah, I can imagine. So do you have plans set up? Are you what's your I assume you have something in mind.
Yeah, no, we let's pretend for a second that we weren't in in the changing industry landscape that we are. I think a more traditional way of going about this would be to see, like how it does in the festival landscape, and then try and sort of like leverage that against like, oh, folks online like they wanted to see sort of an OCD movie, and perhaps leverage that into some kind of distribution deal. I am still relatively new in all of this. This is my it's funny they say, oh, it's like there's some kind of prestige to the word debut. Oh, it's his directorial debut. It's funny because when you're on set, you're a first time director, which is so much more it's so much more real, but I'm still like, yes, there are plans. Said plans right now are they're not concrete because there's not a whole lot to be done at the moment.
Okay, that makes sense. So are you But you are planning on looking for a distributor rather than using Film Hub or something like that?
Sure, yeah, when it's, appropriate to do so, and when the time is right.
Right. Um, yeah. Okay. So you've talked a lot about 2010s independent filmmaking, which I'm assuming you're extending now into the 2020s, just using it as shorthand, or were you specifically referring to that decade?
I didn't mean that like I meant it pretty loosely, but I just remember there was a lot of when I was going to college, film school, and that was between 2011 to 2015. There were a lot of like a lot of indie filmmakers, or when we say indie filmmakers, I mean like pretty famous filmmakers that had blank check budgets to make their few $1 million, like several million dollar movies, quote unquote indie movies, but like Her by Spike Jonze when that came out, it was just, yeah, I guess when I say the 2010s, I meant or the 2010s indie filmmaking. There are a few conventions that I just kind of, I remember the industry fully abandoning that kind of mid-level comedy, mid-level rom-com, mid-level type of movie and getting further and further into the big juggernaut thing, and that the thing to kind of counteract the big juggernaut tentpole IP was what was the scattering of little indie movies, that it was the early 2010s when or I guess it was like 2009 when Paranormal Activity hit and Blumhouse was created. Am I getting that right? Oh no,
I
I'm on
want
a
to say 2000. I want to say 2008. Let's find out if either of us is.
yeah. Oh no, my wrong answer is immortalized on a podcast.
Oh, 2007. We were both off.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, anyway, I feel like one big thing that was a big answer to just sort of these giant tentpole things were these little movies, and oftentimes these were little horror movies. And then we've got like little horror movies from different parts of the world, like the Babadook, and we got little horror
Yeah.
movies from or It Follows, there was a lot that were coming out. Or in the 2010s that it was, I don't know, I kind of, maybe there's some element of nostalgia because I was in film school and then going to see all these movies as they were coming out. Like I'm I there are loads of people that love the indie scene in the 70s, but I wasn't around then. I mean, I do
Fair.
too. A lot of this movie comes from The Conversation. Have you ever seen that one?
Not. I'll check that out.
It's a Francis Ford Coppola movie, and a friend of mine read like a first draft of this and goes, "This feels a lot like The Conversation." And I go, "What's that?" And it's a Francis Ford Coppola movie about a man that is paranoid that someone is bugging him because he is a sound engineer and he knows how easy it is to bug somebody.
Okay.
It's a fascinating movie. And there are some images from that movie that kind of make it into this one if you ever get around to watching it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say
Yeah.
Black
So,
and The Conversation are two of the biggest visuals that kind of made it into this movie.
yeah. Okay. So, thinking about how, yeah, you're right that the low budget and mid budget movies have largely disappeared. We've got at least among mainstream American film production companies, and so if you want to find that kind of thing, you really have to look at independent stuff, and for whatever reason, independent things skew horror. Which I'm certainly not complaining. It's just something that's never made sense to me that people always say, "Oh, horror movies are so cheap to produce." I'm like, can't you just? Isn't a horror movie in terms of production? Isn't that just a rom-com? But you need special effects. Can't you just make any other mundane film using the same resources, except even
If you
fewer of them?
describe a horror to somebody, you often describe the things like you describe things about the movie that often are not the cast. If you describe a rom-com, it's like, oh, it's when Ryan Reynolds blah 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 blah, Like it's
Oh,
a big appeal of the rom-com era, at least as I understand it, was star power. Um,
okay.
and
All
that's
right.
so in the era of Judd Apatow comedies too. I would say that's similar.
Hmm. Hadn't really thought about that, but in retrospect, that does make sense. Yeah. Okay. So I guess even with like a good script, a rom-com starring nobodies is probably not going to do so well. Is that what you're saying?
It might be cheap to produce, but you don't. It wouldn't, at least as the business model went back in the day, it wouldn't make its budget back as many times over as certain heartthrobs would on screen.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. All right. So given everything that you just said about how independent films have functioned in the 2010s, and given how the industry is changing at the moment, what do you see as the future of independent cinema?
I don't know, and I'll give you a lot of follow up to that. I don't know, but it's all going to lead back to I don't know. The first
Go for it.
is there is a lot of independent film. There is an event called the American Film Market that happens every year. And I've been there, and I went there for the first time, like shopping this movie around back in November.
Mhm.
And I was made aware of just how many movies there are in existence that come out or are finished every single year. It was a real, like, you remember in Finding Nemo when the fish are like the three fish are playing and like in the beginning of the movie, and they come out and they just see the open ocean and they're like, oh, they get like they've realized just how big the landscape is. It was one of those moments for me. I So there's that. Additionally, the landscape, well, because of that, because of just the amount of it, the landscape of what is plausible for people to see is a lot more hostile to the people that are newer on the scene. Just because, like, there are so many there's not an increasing demand, but there is an ever increasing supply. The market for time in the time in the day of people watching their shows or movies is not increasing, but everyone's still making more stuff. So it's just incredibly hard to kind of there's a white noise that's been created. It's really, really hard to kind of get through to your audience.
Hmm.
So there's that I've discovered is a challenge. And then we have the advent of, like, of rapidly emerging technologies like AI for all the various purposes it could be used for. I think that's more an industry problem than it is an art form problem. I would say just and I mean there's so many talks on like on the various WGA podcasts, that Script Notes podcast, the Strike Talk podcast. All there's so much information out there as to why AI shouldn't or just kind of like where AI is right now, where it may or may not be, and how studios are kind of using AI in its existence right now to kind of get out of hiring the proper workforce for a certain project.
Right.
What I'm hoping is that on the independent side, where, like, how like vinyl records are cool, like
I
they're not,
do.
yeah, like people have
And
collections
VHS.
of vinyls and VHS. There's like a cool factor to it that, like, yeah, no, it's not economical, it's not cost effective, but I like if there are films in the future that are fully automated or mostly automated, I feel like there are going to be people that still enjoy the mystique of knowing ridiculous trivia about indie films or indie filmmaking. I feel like people love to marry themselves to like the narrative of this movie and how it was almost this, or there's a story there that I think people really getting involved with, that AI or just sort of automated storytelling just doesn't provide as much. Um, that
Yeah.
that's my hope anyway, but I could be wrong. I'm
Yeah, I can't speak for broader audiences, and I know that my own tastes are idiosyncratic, but I can speak for my own tastes. And if I may have a moment here to rant on my own show,
do
uh,
it.
I was having a conversation with myself the other day about this, trying to pin down what it is that I like about independent cinema in contrast with mainstream cinema. Because I do still watch mainstream movies, although I don't obsessively go out and see every new release. But I watch quite a lot more independent film than I do mainstream film, and and I was trying to articulate to myself what the difference is, and I finally think I've figured it out. And I think it's the same thing that a lot of people are talking about with AI. That sure, there will come a day when artificial intelligences can churn out perfectly beautiful, exactly suited to a particular audience's taste films. Um, but I will still not be obsessed with those the way that I am obsessed with a lot of independent films. And I think that the reason for that is the same reason why I am not obsessed with these perfectly beautiful, sort of made by committee films like the Marvel films, where sure they're quite entertaining, but I don't feel like I'm staring into someone's soul when I watch them. Whereas when I watch even a particularly ineptly made independent film like The Room, I feel like I'm looking into Tommy Wiseau's soul when I watch that movie. I feel like every artist is kind of crazy in some way, and I want to be able to see that. I want to try to tease out the different ways that make them a unique individual. And filmmaking is a very collaborative art form, but at least at the moment, all of those collaborators are themselves people. And so, like, returning to the example of The Room, you can see which parts were made by these skilled craftsmen who built the sets, for example, who are professionals, not necessarily at the top of their game, but certainly not inept. And you can see which parts are performed by actors who are being inept, or written by someone who is bearing their soul to the world, but not doing so in an especially skillful way. Um, and I really value all of those things. I think that getting to see not merely the skill of the craftsman, but also the you know the burning naked truth that the artist is trying to put out there, I think is really valuable and important to me as a viewer. And I think that kind of thing has already largely disappeared from most modern blockbusters, because they are so thoroughly made by committee, and because uh, kind of ironically, because the skill level has grown so high in terms of a lot of the things, that you see that go into the production of a film. Um, we've kind of turned the corner a bit in terms of visual effects, in that nowadays, because the expectations of the studio are so high on the visual effects artist, they're not given the time that they need in order to meet those expectations. But when they are, it's perfectly flawless, in a way that stops being interesting to me. I'm much more interested in watching the original Evil Dead and seeing if I can spot the seams in the hag's suit as she's spinning around, than I am in watching a CGI remake that has no seams in the suit. I want to see how the real people built these things. And so it's akin to the difference between actually going out and looking at the pyramids versus looking at a flawless CGI replica of the pyramids that has all of the lines perfectly straight, as opposed to seeing if, maybe I can spot chisel marks or something like that. You can learn things like an archaeologist by observing the details of the artifacts left behind by these people. You can learn about them. You can learn about their techniques. Whereas if everything is just made by a computer, you can't. And that becomes much less interesting to me. And I've seen some pushback against this, but I really don't have any idea how widespread this pushback is. I kind of suspect it's really only weirdos like me who like independent, outsider art, uh, that really care a lot about this kind of thing.
I'll give you
I
half
don't.
pushback. I'll give you half pushback. Half
Oh,
pushback means it's okay. Like I feel the way that you do, in which that it is so much fun to dig into something and find all its little imperfections and put yourself in the shoes of the people making this, and being like and knowing that this director literally begged his aunt to use the house to do this. I love all that. There is a mystique around that. I also like entertainment. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I don't think there's anything wrong with going to see the Barbie movie. I'm seeing the Barbie movie right after this interview.
oh yeah. I saw the Barbie movie at the local drive-in this past Sunday.
Yeah. I don't think
And
there's nothing wrong. Like people want movies are they provide so many different things, and it's okay to want different things out of your movie. There are people that have different hobbies, but they also it's also a social form of entertainment. So it's
mhm.
totally okay to go with your friends that you don't see that much to go see some entertainment. We don't have to treat it like literature. I love treating it like literature, but it's capable of doing both things.
Absolutely. And also to add on to that a bit, I think that there are plenty of independent films that are just sort of mindless fun. And also, sure, it can be enjoyable to, as Martin Scorsese put it, ride a roller coaster. Um, and interestingly, I think that the Barbie movie is actually a little bit on the outside of, like, it's not quite what we've been talking about. There's very little CGI in it. There's much more practical effects. Like they use matte paintings for backgrounds. When was the last time you saw that in a $50 million movie?
I'm excited.
And yeah, and it's directed by Greta Gerwig, who got
I
her
love
start
Greta.
doing
Greta's
like
great. Yeah.
mumblecore indie micro budget movies.
Hmm.
Uh, and so I think hopefully the lesson that studios learn from the success of the Barbie movie is that audiences enjoy seeing a director's vision on screen and not just exquisitely crafted explosions.
Like I would love to see someone take a giant swing at something. And the thing about someone taking a giant swing at something is that sometimes they miss.
Yeah,
Um, Sometimes they miss and sometimes they don't. And it's going to forever be. And this is where I'm kind of getting out of what my skill set is, because I'm not a creative executive. Like there's a lot of very smart creative executives out there that understand that, like, okay, this is what we do at this development firm. Like this is the kind of like movie that we make, and they know what works for them. And at that level, with that much money involved, it is a business.
yeah,
And I acknowledge that, but most of the creative executives that I've met also love indie films. They're not like, there's kind of this trend sometimes to label creative execs as like oh, they're in it for the money. But the thing is,
right.
like, well, first off, yeah, it's a business, it's their job, yes. But secondly, like, they're in it because they love movies too, and they love stories, and they love creating something out of nothing. So I feel like you are right, where that, like, I hope to see more movies, and I haven't seen Barbie yet, but I'm pretty excited. Like, movies like that are a lot of money put down to take a giant swing at something. When Into the Spider-Verse first came out, like, with that style of animation, with the character that general audiences were a little less familiar with, what a giant swing that was.
Yeah, yeah. The one that really comes to mind as someone with a lot of money taking a big expensive swing that may or may not have worked is Avatar,
Yeah,
because that was
absolutely.
Yeah, huge, and that's the sort of thing. Like, honestly, even though I'm not that into the Avatar series, I'm, hey, I'm glad that James Cameron is doing stuff that he loves.
And then you'll see other films that that took a similar swing and that didn't stay in the cultural conscious as much. I don't think it's too much to say that Valerian in the City, this Thousand Planets, which is
Oh
another
man,
like that was another film that another high net worth individual put a lot of their money into that world building, and it didn't culturally pay off in the way that Avatar did.
yeah,
Like
that's
it's
yeah, that's an interesting one because it's simultaneously, yeah, it's the director, I can't remember his name, is the guy who did The Fifth Element.
Luc Besson.
Yeah, Luc Besson. That was a passion project for him, but also it was a comic book adaptation. And
Mm,
so
okay.
uh
It was still
and so
IP.
yeah, exactly. Like, just like the Barbie movie, it's still IP. It's still
Right.
based on an existing thing. Um and so yeah, I don't know.
I
It's a
mean, it's
very,
funny
very
because
complex industry.
for indie filmmakers, any film at all is a big swing. There's
Yeah.
no safe film to make. Which it is freeing in a kind of way for indie filmmakers, because if everything is a throw in all your favors, use everybody you've ever met before, like balls to the wall, let's do this, then it's freeing in a way to be like, yeah, what's one more crazy decision amongst the giant crazy decision of making a film in the first place? So yeah, you can like take a bigger swing and people will respect you a little bit more for it. And then there are certain things where it's like, okay, but now we're living in the realm of reality. What safe choices do we have to make? And a safe choice is rewrite that gun store scene to be in a parking lot, or like
Hmm.
uh
Okay, I see
one
what you mean.
one story I'll never get tired of telling was, so the producer I eventually got to produce this movie, an old friend of mine, Jordan Michaud-Scorza, a couple years before the movie, I had written a different feature script. And I sat her down. I was like, "Hey, Jordan, you should read this." And I'm like, I want to get your take on it. And like, could we do this with this amount of money? And I wrote a deep space sci-fi, and
Ooh.
she read it, and she said in like the nicest, most professional, like let me down easy way possible, that there was no way to physically make this film. And I'm like, I understand. And so the very next thing I wrote was Exposure, and then I got her back, and then we made the movie. But and like with this new movie, I'm writing like on spec in my own time, since no one's doing anything right now. I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna make this by myself in the next however many years or whatever, I can't do this thing, and I'm mature enough to know that I can't do this one thing. I'm not going to be able to I'm a little older, a little wiser. Like this one like creature effect or whatever doesn't, like, can I make this look good? Be real. Probably not. You know.
Yeah.
So and I got to tell you, man, like I know so much more about the craft of filmmaking after making a feature film. Things that you'll like, no matter how many shorts you make, you'll never like, for instance, you never know about the skill of like maintaining relationships with all the cast and crew over that period of time, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. What,
that's
what was the filming schedule? Like, how many days?
It was, so originally it was supposed to be a month and a week, and it extended into a
Okay.
month and into 2 weeks, a month and 2 weeks, because
Okay.
this was because we had to shut down for a week because of COVID. This was in the middle of the Omicron spike, so we thankfully we were able to get everybody back, and none of the actors had booked themselves up, and my producers absolutely kicked butt in getting all the locations to get back together, and they really saved that movie. My entire production department were like busting their asses, like getting that movie back together.
That's
So
great.
everyone was really cool about it. Yeah, thank goodness, because it's COVID. It's one of those like force majeure act of God things. But yeah, no. So it was ultimately from like May 2022 to like June, like mid-June 2022, so yeah, like over that period of time, you're really pushed beyond what you thought, where you thought you could go. And like you don't really have the human capacity to put on a show, a facade for other people. Like the real you comes out under that amount of stress and pressure. And I had like an ugly moment or two, everybody did,
Yeah.
and it's just like I've learned a lot more about just like human connection in times of high stress. I learned a lot more. I learned that in some ways I'm really good in a crisis. And I learned in others like, oh, this I can work on this, and this. It's really a revealing experience over that amount of time with that many things flying around in the air. Honestly, the PAs and the producer and the production coordinator and the UPM, they all went through so much more shit than I did.
All right.
Oh man, if you guys ever make it onto this podcast, guys, Jordan, Tanner, Bear, Margot, all the PAs, I love you, and I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about your movie. I had a great time. Exposure will be available. Exposure will be available online at some point.
I have no idea. I can't promise anything. I don't know. I will do my darndest that people can see this movie, but we'll do maybe in the next life.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, do you have anywhere that you would like to direct people? Website, social media, anything like that?
Yeah. If you want to hear more about the movie, you can check out the Instagram. It's at exposure_movie. And you can also, if you want to hear more about what the movie is, you go to discomfortsthepoint.com. And there's an email mailing list that we promise we won't spam you. If you want to sign up for that. And it's as soon as we have information, you'll have information.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me.